I feel pretty comfortable doing this because I used to be a teacher, and I did that for 5 years, and I taught junior high and high school. And this is an English class, is that correct? And it's a unit on Ms. Bullhouse in
We
what?
are studying the Book of Mice and Men, and we're going to be talking a lot about the American Dream.
Okay, great theme. I think that's wonderful. Well, I want to, let me tell you why I think it's so wonderful. Because I believe that the American dream is alive and well. And I want to tell you a little bit about myself. You have my name, it's Tony Castillo. And I was the last of 11 children, and I was born in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And the reason why I say Albuquerque, New Mexico with such emphasis is because Albuquerque almost kept me in the 5th grade for 2 years. Because one of the things I had to do, or all the students had to do before they went from the 5th to 6th grade, was to spell Albuquerque. And how many of you can spell Albuquerque?
I can.
Can you?
I think so.
Let me hear it.
I think it's like A-L-B-U-R.
Brr.
Wait, hold on. A-L-B-O-U-R. A-L-B-O-R.
It's listen to this. A-L-B-U-Q-U-E-R-Q-U-E. Now, what 5th grader is supposed to be able to spell that? Now, you know that I was worried when I had that test. But the last of 11 children. And my family spoke both Spanish and English. And when I was going through school, I wasn't a very good student because I was mixing up languages all the time. And so I couldn't speak very well. And I had a hard time learning to read because the sounds didn't make sense to me. And then something happened, I think it was at that same time period. I shouldn't be telling you this, but up until that time, up till about the middle of my 5th grade year, I never got 100% on a spelling test. And you guys don't have spelling the way that we used to have it. They used to give us, the teacher would come in and say, all right, number your papers from 1 to 20, and we're gonna, do you still have things like that? Not like that exactly, but we would number our papers from 1 to 20, and she would start out with all of the different spelling words. And most kids got 80s, 90s, and 100s, and I didn't. And I always felt really, really, really bad. And this was going to be one of the spelling tests of the 5th grade again. And I studied so hard because I thought, man, boy, by the 5th grade, if I don't get, and it was kind of like a running joke in the class. And they didn't call me Tony at that time, they called me Anthony. And they go, well, Anthony's not going to get 100. And that was kind of like the thing, you know, people got high grades in spelling. And I remember studying so hard, and I kept telling myself, I've got to be able to do it. I've got to be able to do it. And I went over the words, and I had them written on pieces of paper, and I had them written so many different ways. And I remember the girl sitting next to me was really smart. And what would the teacher do when you had the last word? Exchange it to the person next to you. And the girl always thought that it was a joke, and she would laugh and kind of tease me. And she goes, well, here you go again, you're gonna fail again. I said, well, I'm not failing, I'm just not getting 100s, you know. And so, lo and behold, I get 100 on my test. And everybody they were kind of happy for me, so it was kind of nice. And then something happened to me. I began to realize that for me, in order for me to do well in school, I have to work at it. I have to work very hard in school. But if I can do it in spelling, I can do it in history, and I can do it in math, and I can do it in science. And so the truth of the matter is, even though I had those obstacles, I found out that if I work hard, I can do it. And that kind of set me up for my future, to be quite honest with you. And so I went and graduated from high school, went to college, graduated from college, and in about my junior year, actually my sophomore year of college, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I had no idea. And so I loved, you're gonna find this kind of ironic, I loved reading and I loved writing. And I loved books and I loved literature. And so I thought, well, if I can do that, and I was starting to get an English minor, I went on and I got a degree with a major in, I changed my major to English, and I got a certificate to teach. Because it was right at the end, and I had a year and a half, and I could get all of my credits to become a teacher. So here I was, somebody who couldn't speak English very well, and I became an English teacher. And I always laugh at that and think how ironic that is, that despite that, I became an English teacher. So I did that for 5 years, and my last 2 years, I wanted to move away. My father died when I was 19, so I was a sophomore in college at that time, and he passed away. And he was my mentor, as well as some brothers and sisters. Because being the last of 11 kids, I had a lot of older brothers and sisters who wanted to take care of me. Because the truth of the matter is, the area where I was raised was not the best area of town in Albuquerque. It was called the South Valley. It was a pretty rough area of town. And so my brothers and sisters kind of said, you got to go to college, you got to finish and do all of those kinds of things. So I wanted to move away. I wanted to go, my brother was living in Fort Collins, Colorado. And he said, why don't you come to Fort Collins? And they have a very good school there, Colorado State University. And I wanted to get away. I wanted to be with family. My brother was there. And also they had a university, so if I wanted to go to graduate school, I could go. So I go to Fort Collins and I teach junior high, and I taught there for 2 years. And I remember going to see, at the end of my second year, the administrator who was in charge of language arts for the school district, and he too became a mentor of mine. And I said, I really like what I do. I love my students and I love the subject matter, but I'm not sure if I want to do this for the rest of my life. And he reached behind his desk and he pulled off a job description. And he said, you ought to apply for this job, and I read it over. It was still in education. And I said, well, I would never qualify for that job. And he goes, that's my point. Nobody would. You have as good a chance as everybody else. So I applied for the job. The school year ended June 2nd or 3rd, and this job was going to start June 12th or something. And the job that I got was teaching physical diagnosis at the University of Colorado Medical School. So for 2 years, I taught at a medical school. And it was at that time that I finally learned something about myself. And it goes back to what I mentioned earlier, that for me, I've got to work harder. And I was going to be in front of anywhere between 7 and 8, maybe 10 very, very, very dynamic, very bright students. I taught 3rd and 4th year medical students, and I also taught physicians in various departments. And I found out that I could do it, but I have to work at it. I've got to work harder. I don't have the natural talent to do that. And so it was a great experience. And it comes from a story that my father used to tell me. I went into a bank one time with him, and I remember holding his hand, and I liked going into this bank because it had the cherry panel, and it smelled real clean and real nice. And when I walked in, the bank manager came out and he said, hello, Mr. Castillo. And so he called my father a very formal term, Mr. Castillo, and I thought that was really, really cool. And my father leaned over to me in Spanish, because my eyes were this big, and he said, do you know the difference between you and him? I said, no, because all I could think of was, there's a huge difference between me and him. He said, do you know the difference between you? I said, oh yeah. And this conversation was in Spanish, and he said, nothing. And his message was, there is no difference. It all depends on, he used another word. Is there people who know Spanish in here? They said ganas. Do you know what ganas are? Urge, want, it's desire. He said, you have to have ganas, you have to have the desire to do it. And so my message to you today is, what is your desire? Do you have the desire to succeed? Because it's all in front of you. Because I'm going to tell you this. I was in this classroom at your age, when I was your age. I know what it is like to sit in that chair. I can tell you. And just to let you know, I don't know if Ms. Bullhouse, if I'm pronouncing it correctly.
Heiss.
Bullhouse.
Mm.
I owned a McDonald's in town. And I have about 150 employees. I just opened a new restaurant in Wyoming, here in Wyoming. And I'm a trustee at Hope College. I lecture at Grand Valley State University and at Hope College, and I just gave a lecture to, or not a lecture, but a presentation to the executives at Tierra Yachts. And I was talking about business and business ethics and what I think is important as you move forward in business. And so things I have to work at. All right, so anyway, so I'm teaching at the medical school, and it was with, I got paid through the Department of Public Health. I'm getting a little bit confused, but it was sponsored by the University of Colorado Medical School. And it was a grant. And at the end of the second year, the grant came to an end. And I thought, oh my gosh, I just lost my job. I didn't get fired, there just wasn't money anymore for it. So I ended up going back to Albuquerque. I taught there, got married, and so I taught for 2 years. At the end of the 2 years, I had that same feeling inside of me. I really like what I do, but I don't love what I do. And so I was at a teacher's convention, and I was walking around at all of the displays of books and things like that, and I was talking to a gentleman, and we were having a long conversation. Actually, I was talking to him about the anthology, the set of books that we were using to teach literature at the school. And we were just having a really vibrant conversation. And he said, have you ever considered getting into the publishing business? And I said, no, really, I don't have an interest. Well, about 3 months later, at the end of the school year, I left that job and I started working for Macmillan McGraw-Hill Publishing Company. And I had a career that was going like this. Like this. It was just skyrocketing. And I had people working under me, and I was in editorial and design. So I was making decisions about what stories were going into books. I was talking to authors, no, not so much authors, but a lot of editors on how books are put together, what we wanted to teach at various grade levels. They said, you do a good job in literature, now we want you to talk. We want you to help us out with math and science and social studies and music. So here I was doing things that I couldn't even dream about. And all I could think of is, I gotta work harder, because it doesn't come naturally to me. And so I did that for 15 years. And during those 15 years, if I could be very honest with you, I wasn't a very good father, and I wasn't a very good husband, because all I was thinking about was myself. So I would leave on Sunday afternoons, and I'd fly to Los Angeles, or I'd fly to Philadelphia, or I'd fly to Houston, and then I'd come back on Thursday, and my little kids wanted to play, and I wanted to rest. My wife wanted to go out, and I wanted to stay home. And so, as I was thinking about that, I said, not being a very good father and not being a very good husband, what is going to be my career path now? And I had a very good friend, and I would meet him for coffee in the morning. We went to high school together, and you probably heard stories like this. We ought to start this kind of a business, or we ought to do this, or we ought to do that. And that is a great place to start. But about 1% of people actually do it. And he and I, he said, he was very involved politically in Albuquerque, and he said, they were redoing just a total rebuild of the airport there, and there was a Haagen-Dazs ice cream shop. And he said, I think we ought to they want to change it from a corporate to a franchise owner situation. I said, well, shoot, let's go for it. Well, obviously that didn't happen, but it got me thinking. I'm in mid-career, and I need to make a change, not just for my sake, but for my family's sake. And like I said, I was going on a career like this. I was skyrocketing. And so when that deal didn't actually go through with Haagen-Dazs, he said, I know what we can do. Let's buy a McDonald's restaurant. And I said, man, if you know how to do that, let me know. And so I said, well, I have the card of the guy who heads a franchising, and he's in Denver. Now, I was in Albuquerque, and Colorado was just north. So I called, and he sent me a packet and a very simple application. And so I didn't hear from them for about 6 months, and I remember I told you my brother was in Fort Collins, Colorado, which is about 60 miles north of Denver. And I went to go see him, my wife and I went to go see him. We were driving back on the interstate, and we see this big high-rise building off the interstate, and it said McDonald's, and my wife said, did you ever hear from them? And I said, no. And she goes, we ought to call them up. And I said, shoot, maybe they just trashed the application or something. Well, to make a long story short, the next day my secretary, I lived in Albuquerque, but my secretary was in Dallas. She called me up and she said, this lady in California wants you to call her. And I said, well, was she interested in education? Did she give any information? She goes, no, she was kind of evasive. So I called the lady up and she said, hello, I'm with Human Resources with McDonald's, and your application has been floating around and want to know if you and your wife can come to Denver for an interview. I said, that'd be great. And so we arranged for a babysitter. We went to Denver, and the guy meets my wife and I, and he goes, congratulations. He said, we've received 25,000 applications from around the country, and we are going to interview 2,000. So he said, congratulations, you made a big cut. And he said, and we will be selecting anywhere between 50 and 80 people from around the country to get into the training to become an owner. And that's easy math. I thought, then the first thing that I thought was, my odds of this happening are so small, but what an opportunity. My wife and I can, it was on a Friday, was the interview. My wife and I can have a nice weekend together in Denver without the kids, and it would just be nice. And when the interview went for 2 hours, and it went very, very, very well, and he said, I'll let you know in a couple of weeks. When I got back to my house on Monday, there was a packet yay thick of information that they wanted on me. They went back 7 years in my finances, and they wanted to talk to family and friends, and they wanted to talk to business associates. So it kicked off a series of interviews. And in November of that year, he came to meet me in Albuquerque, and he said, one of the happiest moments of my life is when I can drop a set of keys into somebody's hand and say, that's your restaurant. He said the second happiest one is when I can invite somebody into our training program. So it was a 2-year program, and it was required that I work 25 hours a week. So I worked every Wednesday night from 4 until 1 in the morning, and every Saturday and Sunday for 2 years. And at the end of that, I had the proud opportunity, and I don't want you to laugh at this, I went to Hamburger University in Oak Brook, just outside of Chicago. And so I have my certificate of hamburgerology, and it's real. But why I say not to laugh is because you get into the finances and you get into the real important things, and I did that throughout the 2 years, but in the final 10 days was very intense because it's a test. They're testing you, especially for those who are going to become owners. And it was really kind of interesting, and I told you before, those kinds of things didn't come naturally to me, so I had to work harder. And so as it turned out, I became an owner. My first restaurant was in the state of Wyoming, not this Wyoming, the state of Wyoming. And I had a very, 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 very low volume restaurant. And I took a huge, huge, huge cut in pay. And I kept asking myself, what in the world did I do? What in the world did I just do? And I remember the first day I got there at 4 o'clock in the morning, and some openers got there at 5, and at that time, all of my restaurants here are open 24 hours, but there they were open at 6. So we opened at 6, and you would think that I had put dents in the tables and on front counter because I was wiping them so much. Just wiping the tables down, wiping them again, wiping them again, and wiping again, and nobody came in. At 6:30, nobody came in. At 7 o'clock, nobody came in. Finally, at 7:30, this old guy came in, and he goes, "Oh, so you bought this place, huh?" I go, yeah. And he goes, "Well, didn't you know that the high school, the police department, the fire department, the hospital," and he named a couple of other institutions, "are boycotting this place?" And I thought, oh my gosh, now really what did I do? And I think I needed that lesson. I needed to be humbled. So I told you that my career was going like this. And in life, it isn't always like that. In life, you get thrown curves. You get thrown curves a lot. And the only thing that I could do is I literally saw my wife and kids were in Albuquerque because I didn't want to sell the house until it was, I didn't want the house to be empty while we were trying to sell it. And they were also in school besides. And so I literally saw their faces in front of me because I had the night before wrote a check for everything that I had. And I thought, and I just bought a bag of goods, a pretty bad goods to be honest with you. And I only knew one thing. And the old metaphor of getting your sleeves, and what do? You just roll them up. You roll them up. And it brought me back to memory of when I couldn't spell very well. I had to study harder to do better in school. And now I had to turn this restaurant around, and the only thing that I knew how to do was to really get after it. And so even though I was humbled by it, because I had to be the manager, I had to be the maintenance man, I had to be in the grill area, I had to be in front counter, I had to be in the drive-thru, not obviously at one time, but they were so poorly staffed that it took me a while. And I also said, there's one thing that I do know how to do, and that's teach. So I got involved with the schools, and I was going to junior highs and high schools, and I was talking to them about the importance of education. We talked to them about how important it is to do well in school. And so then I got involved with the Chamber of Commerce. And so I wanted to know that somebody new was in town at that McDonald's. So in 3 years, we doubled the volume. The payments were very huge, but it was amortized over 7 years. So by the time I sold it, I had a lot of equity. And so sold it after 3 years because I had mentioned to you that my father had passed away many years before that when I was 19. But my mother was ill around that time, and so was my wife's father. So we moved to Los Alamos, New Mexico. How much time do I have?
Oh, we still have a lot of time.
I still have a lot of time? Good, okay. So anyway, so I go to, I bought 2 restaurants just out of Santa Fe, New Mexico. Let me go back to Lander, Wyoming. And here was a lesson that I wanted to share with you. And I want to ask your opinion if I did the right thing. At that time, I was doing a lot of the hiring. And I had a sign in front of the restaurant, and it said, "Now hiring," and I happened to be out in the lobby of the restaurant. I was doing paperwork. And this guy comes in, and he's wearing very baggy pants, which is nothing wrong with that. And he's wearing a t-shirt, and nothing's wrong with that. And he comes up to me, and I was wearing a shirt, and it had a McDonald's emblem on it. And he spoke rather rudely and gruffly, and he said, "Hey, you hiring?" And I said, yeah, I am. And I said, and it's good timing now because I'm just finishing up some paperwork, so why don't you fill out the application and we can have an interview. All right. So it's a simple application, he fills it out. And I always used to like basic fundamental questions. One of the questions that I always ask is, why do you want to work? Why do you want to work? I think that's pretty basic. Now, you're going to tell me because I'm going to get money. Well, that's obvious. The question I'm asking is, what are you going to do with it? What motivates you? And let me ask you a few questions. And I'm going to give you some responses. If somebody would tell you, I want to work because I want to buy rims for my car, is that legitimate? What do you say? Is that a motivation? Yes. My dad will buy me a car if I pay for the insurance. Is that a motivation? Yeah. I really like to buy really nice clothes. And my parents said, if you're gonna spend that kind of money, get a job. Is that motivation? Yes. I wanna go to school. I wanna buy books. I wanna pay for first semester. I want to do these certain kinds of things. So I asked this young guy, why do you wanna work? And he goes, I don't know. My buddies are looking for a job and I thought I'd do the same. Well, there was a key to me right away. He has no motivation. My buddies are doing it, so I'll do the same. So then I said, tell me about a typical, this guy was a senior. I said, tell me about a typical Saturday. What do you do on a Saturday? Get up around 11, watch some tunes, have some cereal, watch some tunes, call my buds, watch some tunes, call my buds, find out what we're gonna do. I said, do you ever have to do anything around the house? Nah, my dad's a drag. Do you ever have to clean your room? No, my mother's always nagging me. What's your favorite subject in school? I don't know. English? My teacher sucks, she's boring. Math? I hate math. And you should see my teacher. He's a drag, he's boring. And you know what? My dad's is boring too. This is gonna be a great interview. And I said, history? No. And I got a little upset and I said, I don't mean to be rude to you, but I'm finding you boring. You're boring me. You're boring me right now. I don't work with boring people. I don't think you have a chance of getting a job here. I want people who have passion, who care about others, who want to work hard, who have goals. And that's not a lot to ask. So I don't think I impressed him, but conversely, he didn't impress me very much either. So no gain, no loss. About 30 minutes later, this young girl comes in and she's 16 years old. She has her hair pulled back. She's wearing a tidy blouse and a tidy dress. And she says, excuse me, are you hiring? I said, yeah, and I'm finishing up a few things, and so if you could fill out the application. I said, the timing is good, maybe we could talk. So I started out and I asked the same question. First of all, she was 16, if I didn't mention that to you, she's 16. And I said, why do you want to work? And she kind of put her head down, and then she looked up at me. And And she said, my parents have thrown me out of the house. And my church told me I'm no longer welcome there. And I'm pregnant and I want to be the very best mother I can be. Do you like school? I love school. I want to do well. I made a mistake.